Well, hello and welcome to another edition of Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham, where Team Needham discusses everything healthcare. I'm your host, Shawn Needham, along with my wonderful wife, Janet, and we are super excited to be streaming our midweek podcast from beautiful Whistler, British Columbia. We are going to be hanging out in Whistler for the next few days, hitting the bike park and doing a lot of fun things in Whistler. It's one of our favorite places. So we haven't been since 2019 because if you remember, Canada was really strict on violating people's personal medical freedom, and we decided that we chose our liberty over pleasure. So we have not been since 2019. However, they have released those regulations, so we are back and really enjoying Whistler. And speaking of being back, Joel Evan is back on our podcast. He's going to be discussing the journey to elite husband and dad. And as you know, healthy families start with that. So Joel, welcome to our show.
Hey, great to be back, guys.
Yes. So tell us a little bit about your backstory. You've been on our podcast before. You're a podcaster, you're an author, you're just an all-around great guy. And so tell us a little bit about your backstory and how you winded up doing this.
Yeah, I mean, and it all starts with freedom, like you just mentioned. So, my backstory was I was a first responder, a police officer in Oakland and in San Francisco, California. And they, in 2021, they wanted to restrict my freedom and block my ability to live and move as a police officer. And they wanted to inject me with an experimental product. And they totally violated my rights and my religious freedoms. And if anybody knows anything about Title VII, it was an egregious violation. And I was one of maybe 70 that said, we're not going to do this. And if you want to fire us, go for it. And so I did that. And I got to be honest, didn't think they were going to fire me because when you look at the rules and regulations and the laws, it's pretty clear. Like, you can't fire me. So I knew it was just like cockamamie. I'm like, come on, guys, this is ridiculous. You'll bring me back. You'll realize this is a big mistake. You'll bring me back in about a month. Well, guess what? They didn't. It's been almost 2 years. And luckily in the background, I had been building my resume, if you will, with health coaching, life coaching, because I knew eventually one day I was going to get out of police work because I just felt like I was being hamstrung anyways as a police officer. And I really couldn't do what I wanted to do. And that was help people in a bigger way. And I knew I wasn't making the impact that I wanted to, but I really felt like I could do that in the natural health world. And so about 3 years ago, that led me to launch my podcast and doing some cool things there, as well as start health coaching. And so when I lost my job, I just went all into health coaching, launched my business, came out with my book, Ignite, as I think we were talking about that back in May. And that went bestseller in 7 categories. So I'm super excited, super blessed. And now, I'm taking even a more of a turn back into first responder work, because I will tell you, and I'm sure we'll talk about it today, all this is great. I talk about on your podcast, if you don't have health as one of your number one values, you don't have many wishes. And a healthy person has as many as they want. They can, and we saw that with a lot of people like Steve Jobs, who lost his life to cancer. He had billions and billions of dollars, but he wasn't healthy and he died of cancer. And that's tragic. But also, I will tell you this, as a go-getter that I am, and many of us are like that, driven, entrepreneurial, my family took a back seat and they were not a high priority, and I suffered, and my family life suffered, my marriage suffered. And so I really see a huge need for first responder men in general, by the way. And I've done a lot of deep work myself in the last couple of years, and my marriage has completely transformed. And so that's some of the work that I'm starting to embark on right now.
I love it. Janet, what questions do you have for Joel?
Okay, Joel, what was the aha moment in the marriage and the kids? What brought you to the realization, I'm going to focus on this and I'm going to turn this around?
My wife said I want a divorce.
Ooh, wow.
And actually, I'll take that back. My wife and we've been together for about 11 years. And so my wife, I joke around that my wife's probably been like, should we get a divorce? Do we need to get a divorce? What do you think? How is it? So that I would say about a year ago, the conversation of divorce didn't come up, but it has come up many times. Okay. What I would say is what happened maybe about a year ago was, like, what are you going to do, Joel? Like, you are the problem. You're the problem, like, for why this family is not operating 100% and why this marriage is. And I was like, can I cuss? Can I say I said okay. I said bullshit. Like, it's not my fault. Look at all the things I'm doing. I mean, I'm a life coach, for crying out loud. And I don't say that in an egotistical way. I'm only saying in the sense that I'm sure a lot of guys feel this way. Like, what are you talking about? I'm doing everything. I'm growth minded. I read all the books. I got all the books about parenting, and I'm reading them all. What are you talking about? It clearly cannot be my fault. Like, it's your fault, or even the kids that are not behaving correctly. That's the problem. And she's like, no, definitely. You got to look in the mirror again. And I'm like, I've done it many times. There's nothing else left to do. And she's like, well, you should get around a men's group, and there's some guys doing some fabulous things I hear them talking about. Why don't you join one? I was like, okay, I'll join it just to make you happy and to prove to you that I am perfect and I am not the problem. And guess what? Lo and behold, I found out I was the problem, and I was not leading correctly, and I was not serving my family to the fullest. And so I think the more I started to dive deep into that and get into more men's work and a brotherhood, I started to realize, oh, okay, so there was more room for me to grow, and I was missing that. So that was the aha.
Well, thanks for your honesty, and thanks for your humility too. I think one of the things that gets some of us men in trouble the most, and maybe just humans in general, but is pride. And we don't ever want to admit that it could be our fault. So, releasing that and being humble is a big step. So tell us how this has changed your life coaching business.
Yeah, I'm taking listen, I'll still do my health coaching because I just love that. I mean, I just enrolled in a new program to learn how to help people with anti-aging and longevity and focus on that kind of aspects of health. So I still love it. I won't quit with that because it's important. You know that too. I mean, I see all the photos of you guys just ripping and rolling down skiing and biking and all this cool stuff. So you know how important health is. So that'll never stop. And that's a key aspect of too, I think, of being an elite dad and husband, honestly, is your health. I mean, I was just talking to a dad the other day. We were on a camping trip, and it blew my mind. I had no idea. We were just casually talking. And if you go camping, Shawn, what do you usually eat when you go camping? Like, what's the typical meals that people are eating on a camping trip?
Well,
for dinner.
I'm going to speak for ourselves because that's all I know. But we pretty much eat the same thing.
Yeah, we do.
We eat the same thing we do at home. We just cook it different. We'll cook it in a Dutch oven. We'll cook it over a fire. We'll grill. We'll grill a lot. So we grill meat, whether it be hamburgers.
You nailed it. You nailed it. So grilling, like, that's what you do, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So we grilled steaks, we grilled hamburgers, we did hot dogs one night, some carne asada, all that good stuff. And so now, like, the trip is on its way out and we're ending, and I'm just talking to this dad, and he's like, "Oh yeah, like, I have gout," and I was like, "Oh my, what?" And he didn't mention it like in a bad way, but I was just thinking, like, and you know me, I'm a big fan of meat as well as you are, but I was thinking, maybe the amount you had for someone with gout, maybe you want to settle that first before. But it just blew my mind. He was just so comfortable having gout, and it kind of bothered me afterwards. I was like, dude, like, you're the leader for your family. Like, they depend on you. You have 3 beautiful kids. Like, you can't just smile and be like, yeah, I have gout. Like, it's no, like, you gotta handle that, man. Like, more inflammation, who knows what's going to happen from gout. I mean, more metabolic issues. And we saw last year, or the latest study came out, 6.8% of the world is metabolically fit, which means like 90, 6.8%. So 90, yes. in the US. So 94% of us are not, which is tragic. So that's going to lead to a whole bunch of issues for this guy. And I just think, how are you going to be the leader of your family? By the way, he's a great dad. Like, he provides for them. He does all these things. And I think he's fabulous. But I just thought, man, what a tragedy if this guy were to go out early in life or just not be there enough. Or I hear from a lot of dads too, I'm just tired. I don't have energy to play with the kids. Like, that's a freaking tragedy. So again, I won't stop with health. But yeah, my coaching, I've been focusing more on doing the men's work. So I'm really excited about that. Like I said, working with first responder men, just because I know that community better than anyone, really. I mean, having done it for almost 15 years as a police officer, I know the struggles, the shift work, and constantly one of the biggest things I hear from men in that arena is, how do I manage this work-life balance? Like, how do I do it? Like, I'm getting pulled with shift work and overtime. There's low staffing right now across the United States for police officers. And so how do I do this and maintain this healthy relationship? It's the number one thing I hear from men.
Yeah, we were just watching a program last night, and of course we thought of you. I don't remember what department they were from, what city they were from, but they were having huge staffing issues on their police force. And then they showed some video from San Francisco about basically the looting that goes on because they don't do anything about it. It's a very sad situation. So I want to go back a little bit and just ask, how did it work out for San Francisco after they laid all these police officers off like yourself? How's that going for them?
Not well. And, I've been on Fox News pretty regularly now and talking about those issues and trying to bring light to it. I am always, people will dog me and say, yeah, you're just reporting the bad things about San Francisco. And I go, hey, listen, let's be realistic here. Okay. Yes, San Francisco is still a beautiful city. There's amazing things about it, just like in all cities, but don't kid yourself and tell me that what's happening there is not as bad, because I can tell you for a fact that when I go to a city just across the bay or just a city south, there's a city called Daly City, just south of San Francisco. When I go to that city, I don't see cops standing at a Walgreens guarding the Target. No one's working overtime to protect some of these measly stores. I mean, it's ridiculous. And my mom lives an hour away. I don't see cops standing at a Rayleigh's or a Safeway or anything guarding the food aisle. I see that in San Francisco. So the people that are like, no, that's not, they're just that's hyperbole, Joel. No, it's not. It's happening. And I can tell you, it's happening so frequently, even the quote unquote liberals, and I don't use that in a negative way, but that was just how they would, and I've talked to them and they're like, listen, Joel, I'm liberal as heck. But let me tell you, these guys are business owners. So liberal or not, they are compassionate, but they're like, something's got to change. Like my business, it's safety. This guy is a business owner and gets stabbed with a knife for just recording some guy breaking into a car, not even his car. And he's far away. The guy saw him and confronted him and stabbed him. I mean, this is crazy. I was just in San Francisco a couple weeks ago visiting family, and coming back off the Embarcadero, and I on-viewed an auto burglary. So I actually witnessed one take place from a crew, and then right just before that, I'm looking at a Canadian couple because I was walking back to my car, and a Canadian couple is like, "Oh, our car just got broken into." So. Yeah, there's no mistake about it. They have some trying times and their staffing's at the lowest. They can't hire anybody. The latest academy they filled had about 30 people, but then that same month, 44 people retired. So you got to remember, out of those 30, maybe 50% of them will make it. So you're looking at 15, and that takes 9 months to graduate a recruit. So they're in a world of hurt, and they're going to have to turn some things around.
So let's go back to your friend on gout and focus on gout just a little bit. Can we do that?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So you mentioned meat, and I know we learned, and I think what you were alluding to is that eating meat can cause gout, correct? We're taught that in farm school that eating too much red meat can cause gout.
Yeah, and I was being very broad. I was a very broad brush I'm poking, and I'm really thinking about, uric acid, the production of uric acid. And, I know there's 3 ways that uric acid can be produced in high amounts. One would be fructose, one would be purines, which you can see from a lot of like red meat, even sardines, by the way. And so that's kind of what I was thinking. But yeah, go ahead, please. Let's chat about this. Well, there's some new studies, I think, talking about uric acid, by the way. So, and I haven't got a chance to read it.
Yeah, and I don't know. I'm just rethinking a lot of stuff that I've learned before. And honestly, I'm not even trying to be very scientific about it. I'm just trying to be rational about it. And the fact that we learned that eating red meat or could cause gout. I just think about that. I just think how that just doesn't seem really rational. But here's the question I would always ask first. And because I know people that have gout, and sometimes they're willing to give up some of those things. One of the things they're not willing to give up is alcohol.
Very good.
And so one of the things I always ask is like, well, are they drinking alcohol? Okay, was it the red meat or was it the alcohol? Well, I don't want to give up my beer. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, so that's the question I always ask when it comes to gout now.
Well, it's the same thing with salt, right? It's like we've demonized salt to be the worst thing because it helps with blood pressure. I mean, that is like the most ridiculous thing I think a Western doc can prescribe. You tell this person not to eat salt, but you're totally okay with them eating white bread that is processed, that has a ton of like sodium chloride. I mean, salt is actually beneficial to us. Now, the processed food that you're eating, yeah, that's not beneficial. I'm sure there's even people on the carnivore diet that maybe, let's say, had gout, but are doing wonderful because just by going on carnivore and removing processed food and sugar, they even though maybe their quote unquote uric acid levels let's just say they were high, if that was the measurement we're using, they were doing everything else so well, it didn't matter.
Right. And that's my rational thought is I just, I mean, traditionally when you seen what we've eaten for generations and generations, we've eaten a lot of red meat. And it wasn't until the last 70 years that it's been vilified. And we've eaten processed foods and we have all these diseases coming out. So I'm just not buying that gout is caused by eating red meat. I just highly doubt that. But you're right. It's the processed food thing. That's really what it is.
Well, let's remember it's the combination of anything that's causing inflammation. And in America, it's the food per se, but it could also be not sleeping. Then we make poor choices, all that combined. I think the root cause of a lot of diseases in our country is the inflammation part. And if you're not addressing that, then it's still going to be there. But Joel touched on something that just really triggered me. And, there's so many people out there in the United States that they identify this disease as who they are, rather than getting rid of it, taking it head on, like, hey, I'm not living with this. I'm moving on. This is not a part of who I am and what I'm going to deal with. And that leadership thing, I think, for fathers is a big step because, if we take charge of our own life and give that example to our children and wife, then that whole household is going to change and shift and to make healthier decisions for themselves.
Yeah, it's such a great point. I was just on a podcast the other day and we were talking about, well, how do these things called habits, how do they stick? How do they stick? And I said, well, they don't stick until it becomes your identity. It just becomes a part of who you are. And so, and the example I love to give is if I were to ask you guys, hey, Shawn, Janet, you guys, would you like a cigarette? Your response would be, no, thanks, Joel. I don't smoke. That'd be your response. Thank you, but I just don't even do that. Right now, imagine a person who just is in the process of quitting smoking. Their response most likely would be, "Oh no, thanks. I just quit, and I'm working on not doing that anymore." You see the difference? The difference is in identity. One identity is like, that's not even, I wouldn't even consider that. Like, thanks, but no thanks. The other one is like, I'm working, I'm trying. Right. And I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying there's a little nuance there. And I tell people the same thing. Like, I couldn't imagine going a day not working out. It's not, and I don't even work out a lot. I do like 10 to 20 minute workouts every day, but I'm just consistent about it. And so it's the same thing, Janet, you're talking about even with your marriage. I even asked my wife, I said, what do you think one of the biggest problems you see in just first responders and marriage and based on our marriage? And she said identity. That was exactly what she told me. She said identity, because the identity of like, I am a cop. This is what I do. Therefore, this is how I act. And this is how I need to provide. And I remember when I was first a police officer at 25 and I was in Oakland, I thought I was the baddest man on the planet. I thought like if I went into a party or a room or just, hey, what do you do for a living? Oh, I'm an Oakland police officer. Everyone would gasp and be like, wow, like, tell me more. Is it dangerous? I'm like, yeah, actually it is. And it was always fun and exciting to talk about. And I kind of wore that as a badge of honor, even if I wasn't getting sleep, even if I wasn't spending time with my family and kids. Oh, I got called in again today. Cool. But like secretly, I'm like, yeah, like that's cool because I'm an Oakland cop, top 5 dead, city in the world for like in the nation for crime and danger and violence. So I thought it was pretty cool. But that identity, like you said, that can really strip you from being able to see in a more global aspect of like what else is going on, because you're so narrow focused on this is who I am. Therefore, this is who I need to be.
So that brings up a good point. So I'm going to put you on the spot. Okay, Joel?
Of course.
So, and
Shawn, I wouldn't come on
you,
your podcast to not be asked tough questions. So let's go.
Right. And you know, one of the things that I love about doing this podcast is that I get to learn things, you know, from our guests, and I love that part of it. And I get to learn things about myself. And you just brought up a good question. If somebody asks me, well, what do you do? I mean, my first response is, well, I'm a pharmacist, right? Right?
A compound pharmacist.
Yeah, exactly. Even more detailed than that. That's usually what I say.
Come on.
Well, I'm a specialty compounding pharmacist.
Yes.
When in reality, we should say, you know what? I'm a husband to my wife and a father to my children. Even though my kids are grown, maybe that's the first thing we should answer with. Because really, honestly, the reason I was able to be a husband and a father is because I was a pharmacist to support being a husband and father. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, maybe next time, maybe I should make it a habit when somebody asks me that question. I'm going to have to really think about it. Say, well, I'm a husband and a father. That'd be a good answer.
It'll be interesting too, though. Are your conversations more interesting because of that? I mean, you know, I think some people would think, no one's going to respect that, right? Like that would be kind of like, oh, that's it. That's all you do. Do you know what I mean? Like I think that would be that's probably why people don't actually do that.
Yeah, but you know what? I'll bet you in some reality, I bet you people are wanting people to say that. I mean, I will say this, Janet's mother, she is still alive this day. Her health isn't great. But she was a nurse for, I don't know, 30 years, something. Mm-hmm. She was a nurse for 30 years. She never, when she would be asked what she did for a living, she would say a housewife. And she was not embarrassed of that. And she shouldn't have been.
Totally.
You know, that's really cool. That was her identity. Even though she supported the family for a while because Janet's dad was sick, she was a primary income in the family. And yet she called herself a housewife.
Well, yeah. You know, one of the things that I'm sorry to interrupt you, Joel, but one of the things that I think that is very interesting to me is that I think, and I'm going to put Hollywood on the spot with this, because I never heard growing up, and my father started his family late. I never heard this was his work for a man and this was her work for a woman. I always heard it was a team effort, right? And that meant whether my dad did the dishes or cooked or did laundry or participated, it was a team effort. So I feel like maybe this has kind of been pushed on us a little bit in our generation to say, you know, I'm a cop or a police officer or I'm a pharmacist. Like that identity thing has shifted.
It has completely shifted. And here's the paradigm shift too, is back in the day, let's just go back probably to the early 1950s. I mean, that's just kind of the time frame I'm thinking. It was okay. It was different, right? Men went to work, women stayed home and took care of the kids. That was just like kind of accepted. That was the culture. That was the state of the union, right? And your job as a father then was to go out, make money, provide. And the way I think about it is your job was to go out, kill and conquer, right? Come back, provide. And that was okay. Like, you're a great husband. Thank you. That's not the same anymore. If you're going out and killing and conquering and you think like that's just good enough, sorry, I'm here to tell you, you're wrong. Women have way more rights now, and it's a good thing. Women have way more rights. They're empowered. They can go out and make just as much money as you. I mean, maybe, and some women be like, no, that's not true. Listen, I know what you're talking about, but let's not get into little details. But yeah, I mean, you can go out. You know what I'm talking about. You can go out. You can provide for yourself. And these women are out and they're kicking butt and they're taking care of the family. They're doing it all. So to just think like it's good enough as a guy to go out and just make good money and provide, sorry, here to tell you that is not that's not the metric. And women and their families, kids especially, they need more so than ever. They need to feel that you are connected to them and that you're present and that you see them.
Absolutely. I'm going to stream this comment. Kelly Young, she is one of our loyal listeners and viewers. Thank you, Kelly, for your comment. I am so in alignment with you guys. And of course, Joel, you did comment on that, and I really appreciate that. We like to stream all the comments that we get when we have listeners and viewers comment. So, you know, you really hit on something, Joel, and kind of piggyback on what Janet was saying is that women and men can pretty much make the same amount of money. And you're right. And we want to get into that discussion on this podcast. But that's why it has to be a team effort, and a team effort to raise a family. And what is a husband's role? What is a wife's role? And I think you have to designate that and talk about that as a husband and wife.
Yeah. And one of the things I would tell men is, just like one of my big aha moments, going back to the aha moment, was, and I look at it now and it was like, Joel, like, you were completely selfish not to do that, actually. Like, it's ridiculous you didn't come to that sooner. It is what it is. It took me longer, but taking 100% responsibility for your family. You are the dad. You are the leader. I don't care what your wife is doing, how she's acting. I don't care how your kids are acting. Take ownership and lead from the front. There's a great quote by the Navy SEAL Jocko Willink, who a lot of people know, and he's got a couple of books out there, Extreme Ownership, and a lot of people know him. And I love it. In one of his books, he says, there are no bad teams. There's just bad leaders. And that hits home. And what he's saying there too is, if a mission were to fail out in the Navy SEALs, if they were to actually fail and something didn't go right, he can't go as a leader and be like, hey, why didn't you turn left? Why didn't you do that? I told you to do that. Actually, he needs to step up and go, what did I not explain correctly to you? Like, how did you make that error? I thought we were on the same page. And then he can get some feedback from that operator who's going to say, oh, I didn't know. We didn't practice enough time. We didn't do this. Okay. So we need more reps. Gotcha. That's a leader. That's a leader who's taking ownership and getting that valuable feedback and showing up. Most people won't do that. They're going to be, my team sucks. It's their fault. It's not my fault. That's what I was doing.
Well, I think sometimes in our society now, we don't promote men being accountable and being held responsible for a lot of things. Let's look, for example, the children out of wedlock. For instance, 70 years ago, that used to never happen. If a woman got pregnant, a man would marry her. But now we've got the government playing patriarch and saying, oh, well, you don't have to, we can support you. You don't need to have a husband or a father in the picture. We can support this kid. So we'll just give you money and you don't have to marry anybody. And that's part of the problem, is then we don't have men stepping up and being responsible and being held accountable.
Yeah. And there you go. There's paths. There's so many things to look at. We're typically, what you just brought up is, we're being trapped by a lot of our old beliefs, a belief system that is just old and is outdated. And it usually comes from childhood. And one of the ways that can happen is from entities like the media, the government, and creating this culture that, it's okay. And I always think about habits and how do we form better habits. And James Clear, who wrote Atomic Habits, he talks about, like, one of the fastest ways you can create a habit is by really just looking at your environment. He's like, there's lots of things you could do, but if you were to do one thing, like, look at your environment. And I think that's what you're speaking to, is if the environment is breeding this habit, then of course it's going to continue, right? And it's the same thing for me. If I am in an environment that breeds working out, I surround myself with people who work out, or I put a gym in my home office, like, I'm creating an environment that incentivizes me to work out. Then there's the flip side, creating an environment where you put, bad food in your refrigerator,
right,
or the gym is, 45 minutes away. Like, it's going to be really hard for you to stick to some good habits. So.
Yeah. I was thinking about the food one, one of the ways, because I love junk food. And if it's in front of me, it's very hard for me to turn it away. And once I start eating it, I can eat a whole bag of chips, a whole bag of cookies. So the way we create that good habit at home is we just don't buy it. Because I guarantee you, as much willpower as I think I have, at 9:30 or 10 o'clock at night, getting ready to go to bed, I'm like, oh, I need some kind of snack. Well, instead of eating an apple, or instead of eating, Greek yogurt, if there was junk food there, I'd probably eat it. So Janet just doesn't buy it.
That's the simplest thing. Same with us. If it's there, I'll eat it too. There's no willpower in the world. People think, oh, Joe, you don't have any fun or anything. Like, no, I actually have probably a piece of dark chocolate every night. So I have my little vices, but they're so minute that I'm enjoying myself, and I'm not doing anything, crazy. I'm not splurging. I'm not overdoing anything. I'm in balance.
Well, one of the things that Shawn and I talk about with this balance thing is, really, if you think about, like, the balance of it, you probably are going to eat more chocolate than most people over your lifetime. It's just how and when, and you get to enjoy it versus just inhaling it. But getting back to being a father, one of the things that Joel, that my dad did that I, to this day, reflect back, he was very intentional about spending just some time with us individually. So do you do that with your kids, or how does that work out with that? Share with us a little bit, because I think that is something that's impacted me throughout my whole entire life. So I want to hear what you do.
I love that you shared that. That's so cool. That's something that you still remember about your dad. Wow, that's amazing. Yeah. So one of the things I do is it's just part of my habit stack. So every day I make sure that I spend one-on-one time with my kids. I have 2 boys, and so I make sure I spend time with them for 10 minutes a day, just with them, whatever they do. Now, most people are saying 10 minutes, that's nothing. Okay, listen, I spend way more time that, but I'm telling you, my habit is to at least be only with that individual kid for 10 minutes. And I call it special time. And I didn't invent this. Actually, I got it from a coach that I work with, Tasha Shore. And what special time is a time where they get to choose whatever activity they want. And it's just 10 minutes, you and me, whatever. You want us to play the most goofy, a game that I can't stand to play, I'm going to happily play that game and we're going to go do it. So that's what I make sure I do every single day, that they each get their own individual 10 minutes. And then usually collectively we're playing, probably 2 hours a day as a family, just, all together. So that's the way to do it. And again, I think most guys would say 10 minutes is nothing. You would be so surprised at how powerful 10 minutes can be, because it's just that one-on-one time, and it starts to compound and build over time. Just like any habit or anything, if you look at it as an investment in your bank account, you're putting that investment into that account and it's going to grow over time. You may not notice it the first time or the first week but look at you still remember that after all these years. How cool is that memory is still there? Like, my dad was there for me. Like, I felt connected and alive to him. So that's what I do. And it's transformational. And then I also make sure that every week I take each family member out on a date. So each boy and then my wife. So it just rotates. So we plan a special day. Usually it's like an hour at least of time, kind of the same thing, like whatever you want to do. And we make sure that we hit that. So that's what we do.
Well, let me tell you, we have 2 boys too, and they're 23 and 21. And I don't know if it was intentional or not, but we homeschooled our kids through junior high. So I would try to spend one-on-one time with them as much as I could. And I didn't spend a lot of one-on-one time with them. It was usually 2-on-1, because they were always almost together, because they're close brothers or close in age. And but it's
same for me, by the way. Sometimes days it's not perfect, and sometimes that's what happens,
Right. And there would be certain times where they'd be by themselves. But I will say it's really cool to see how they've grown up to be great young men, and some of the questions that they will ask me, and they still communicate more with Janet, and I think that's just the way it is. But the questions that they will ask me or talk to me about that they don't really talk to her about, and it makes me proud. It makes me, realize that those times I spent chatting with him, and a lot of a few of the subjects are working out. They ask me about training and working out, and they ask me about cars, of course, if they're having car problems. Well, they'll actually usually, if they're having major car problems, they'll text Janet, and then they'll start texting me, and then Janet will have me start texting them.
I want to go to mom first. I don't want to tell dad just yet.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
And then you speak of investing too. We taught our kids early about saving money and the importance of saving money. And, they'll ask me questions about that. And that just makes me feel really, really good. So those one-on-one times when your kids, and they're never too young to do that. And Jan and I treated our kids. We never talked down to our kids, even from when they were, 3, 4, 5 years old. We just talked to them like they were adults, and didn't dummy stuff down. And it's just nice to see that paid off.
Yeah, and I think the key thing you're mentioning is that you created this trust, right? You created this trust with them, and that's been a big thing for me. Is I've had to rebuild the trust. And again, it wasn't like I was beating my kids or, cheating on my wife. None of that. It's just that I wasn't present with them when I was with them. I was thinking about being on Shawn Needham's podcast and posting on TikTok and, oh my God, I got to do all these things. I just got fired. I got to start a new business. I got all these things on my mind. And so I just wasn't present, man. And, so even if I'm spending hours with them and you're not present, it's the equivalent of basically spending no time, and they know it. My kid, if I'm on my phone, he tells me, "Get off your stupid phone, Dad. Get off your stupid phone." So they know, and sometimes guys have to rebuild that trust. And I would just say it might be a long game you're gonna have to play, and just be willing to play it because you screwed up and you got here and you screwed up. Having that relationship where they still trust you today and they have that open relationship, like that's amazing. Like you earned that, and so that's really cool.
So, Joel, as we wind this podcast up, tell us what you have a passion for.
I mean, other than health, like I said, I think right now I'm in the process of launching this new program. Should be around September 1st for first responder men. I've just really been lit up by this, and it's just opened up a lot of kind of more light bulbs, aha moments, more introspection to who I am as and how I'm showing up as a leader, as a dad, and yeah, I mean, that's my passion, man. And then, I feel like as a coach, and this, coaches, they just want to help people. I interview a lot of coaches and I'm around it's just so interesting to see, like, some coaches, including myself, we're so hell bent on helping people. We just it's like something that lights us up. And, a lot of times we'll even do it for free. Like there's just, and I talk to a lot of, like I said, coaches on my podcast, and so I just love helping people, man. If there's something I can do, especially in this world, I feel even more determined to help people, because the last 2 to 3 years, there's been a lot of censorship in the natural health world. And I don't stand for that. I don't stand for it at all. And I'm happy that I was able to kind of make a footprint with my own story about not backing that experimental product, because a lot of people, and I'll say this, a lot of the so-called quote unquote toughest people, the SWAT team members or whatever at SFPD and all around the world, they back down and they dropped their sword because they caved into something that was easier. And that moment is really kind of, now that I've had some time to reflect on it, has really just stuck into me. And it just makes me realize, man, you got to be aligned with your truth. People need to understand, what is your truth? What do you stand for? And what hill are you going to die on? And most people don't even know what that is. And so I would strongly urge people to do that introspection, because when's the next pandemic or when's the next just catastrophe in your life going to show up? And how are you going to show up?
Yeah. You did the right thing, Joel, and thank you for that and being inspirational to others. So what is the best way to get a hold of you if people have any questions? Look at that stud right there.
Hey, look at that. I didn't do that. My brother did all that. He's my videographer, website guy. Yeah, go to joelevancoaching.com. You can shoot me an email, info@joelevancoaching. I'm on Instagram. I'm pretty active there @joelevancoaching. That's a great way to just connect with me. It's really me. I'll respond to your DMs as long as you're not creepy and asking me to, you're going to sell me some new sales hack funnel or something, because I'm getting a lot of those, which is annoying. As long as you're not that, and I'm happy to answer questions, and you can see I love to do this stuff. So
awesome. Well, Joel, as always, it was a pleasure having you on today. You help us realize our goal of this podcast, which is to educate and empower consumers to take charge of their own health. So thank you so much for being on.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Thanks. And listeners, viewers, thank you for tuning in to Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham. Tune in Monday, our regularly scheduled podcast, 12:30 to 1:30 Pacific Standard Time. We'll see y'all later. Bye.